Have you ever felt stuck, like you're always waiting for the right time, the perfect moment, or the right mindset to chase your dreams? In What Happens When Waiting Holds You Back from Achieving Goals, we dive into how hesitation, fear, and overthinking can become invisible barriers that quietly delay your progress. This video uncovers the hidden costs of waiting, reveals why action often matters more than timing, and shows how to break free from the trap of someday. If you're tired of standing still and ready to move forward, this is the message you need to hear today. Waiting for the perfect time to start pursuing your goals might sound wise and strategic, but in reality, it's often just a sophisticated form of procrastination. The truth is, there is rarely, if ever, a truly perfect moment to take action. Life is unpredictable, circumstances change, and challenges will always exist in one form or another. People often convince themselves that they need to wait for more money, more time, more energy, or better circumstances before they begin. But while they're waiting, precious opportunities slip away, momentum is lost, and the dream starts to fade. This illusion of perfection keeps people stuck in preparation mode, constantly tweaking plans, doing more research, or waiting for external validation instead of making actual progress. The idea of a perfect time can be comforting. It gives people a false sense of control, a belief that they're being responsible or wise by holding off. In reality, it's often a subtle form of fear, fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, or fear of the unknown. It allows people to avoid the discomfort of starting, the risk of not succeeding, and the vulnerability of putting themselves out there. But no one has ever succeeded by waiting their way to success. Achievements come from action. Even messy, imperfect action is more powerful than standing still. Every successful person you admire likely started when they didn't feel fully ready. They figured things out along the way, learned from mistakes, and adjusted their approach in real time. Another hidden cost of waiting is the loss of emotional energy. The longer someone waits, the heavier the goal begins to feel. It becomes mentally exhausting to think about something you deeply want but haven't acted on. Doubt creeps in, confidence erodes. The excitement that once surrounded the goal begins to fade. Eventually, what was once a passionate desire starts to feel like a burden or even an impossibility. That's the trap of waiting for the right time. You slowly talk yourself out of something you were once excited about. Instead of waiting, the most effective thing to do is to start. Start small, start scared, start without knowing exactly how it will all work out. Action leads to clarity. Once you begin, you get real feedback. You learn what works and what doesn't. You grow, adapt, and build momentum. That's how real progress happens. Not in perfect planning, but in real, often uncomfortable movement forward. Waiting feels safe, but action creates change. So if you've been waiting for the perfect time, realize that the moment you decide to begin is perfect enough. Fear is one of the most powerful forces that can hold a person back, yet it often hides in plain sight, disguised as patience, preparation, or the need to wait just a little longer. When someone delays pursuing a goal, they might tell themselves it's because they need to be more ready or that conditions aren't quite right. But deep down, it's often fear that's doing the talking. Fear of failure is the most common culprit. People worry that they might not succeed, and rather than risk embarrassment or disappointment, they choose to stay in the comfort zone of waiting. It feels safer to not try than to try and fall short. But in reality, avoiding the fear only feeds it, allowing it to grow stronger and more convincing over time. Another form of fear is the fear of judgment. When we go after big goals, we often put ourselves in the spotlight. Friends, family, colleagues, or even strangers may have opinions about what we're doing. The fear of being judged, misunderstood, or criticized can be paralyzing. This fear convinces us to delay our efforts until we feel we're good enough, or until we can be sure people will approve. The problem is that external validation is never guaranteed, and trying to avoid criticism often leads to missing out on authentic success and fulfillment. Even fear of success can hold people back. It sounds strange, but it's real. Sometimes people are afraid of what will change if they succeed. Will success bring more pressure, more responsibility, or higher expectations? Will it alienate them from others or disrupt their current life? These subconscious fears can create a resistance to taking steps forward even when everything looks right on the surface, so they wait, not because they're not ready, but because part of them is afraid of what happens when they actually achieve their goal. This fear-based waiting feels justifiable. It's easy to rationalize and convince oneself that patience is a virtue, or that slow and steady wins the race. While patience has its place, there's a difference between strategic timing and fear-based hesitation. One is thoughtful and intentional, the other is avoidance wearing a mask. The key to breaking free is recognizing when fear is disguising itself as something else. It takes courage to be honest with yourself and admit that fear is influencing your choices. The good news is that fear doesn't have to stop you. Once you name it, you take away some of its power. When you face fear and move forward anyway, you build confidence. Courage grows with every small action you take despite being afraid. You don't have to eliminate fear to move forward. You just have to stop letting it make your decisions for you. When someone is inspired to chase a goal, the initial energy is often high. They feel motivated, excited, and full of possibility. But if action is delayed for too long, that motivation doesn't just pause, it starts to fade. Momentum, once lost, is hard to regain. This is one of the most subtle yet dangerous effects of waiting too long. When the energy behind a goal begins to wane, people often interpret it as a sign that they weren't meant to pursue it. In truth, it's usually just the natural consequence of inaction. Enthusiasm is not a permanent resource. It needs to be fed with progress and motion. Without forward movement, even the strongest motivation dries up, leaving behind a sense of doubt or indifference. Momentum is a powerful force. Once you start moving toward a goal, each step fuels the next. Even small wins generate confidence and clarity. You start to believe in your ability, you see real progress, and that fuels your desire to keep going. But when you pause for too long, the opposite happens. Your inner voice starts asking, "Why haven't you started yet?" Or maybe this isn't the right time after all. These questions slowly chip away at the commitment you once had. Self-doubt grows stronger. The goal begins to feel distant or even out of reach, not because it actually is, but because the emotional momentum behind it has evaporated. This stalled energy can have a ripple effect on other areas of life too. When you continuously put off something important to you, it can lead to frustration, restlessness, or even guilt. You may begin to feel like you're wasting time or that you're failing yourself. That emotional weight adds pressure, making it even harder to restart. It creates a cycle. The longer you wait, the worse you feel, and the worse you feel, the harder it becomes to start. This is why people often abandon goals entirely, not because they weren't capable, but because they lost the energy and belief to keep going. The truth is, starting, even imperfectly, is what keeps the fire burning. It keeps your goal alive in your mind and heart. Progress creates momentum, and momentum sustains motivation. When you're actively working towards something, even if it's just small steps, your brain begins to register success. That feeling of moving forward is incredibly empowering. It becomes easier to overcome challenges, stay focused, and push through obstacles. In contrast, waiting keeps you mentally stuck. You might still think about the goal, but without movement, it becomes just an idea instead of a living mission. You can reignite motivation, but it takes effort, and usually it starts with one decision to act. The key to keeping momentum alive is to never let too much time pass without some form of progress, because once momentum fades, restarting can feel like starting over entirely. Opportunities in life are often fleeting. They appear in moments, some small, some life-changing, but they rarely wait for long. When you delay action because you're waiting to feel more prepared, more confident, or more comfortable, you run the risk of missing those moments altogether. The job offer, the business idea, the invitation to collaborate, or even the internal spark of inspiration, these are all time, sensitive in nature. When you hesitate, when you postpone action, those windows can close. And while some may reopen later, many won't. What was once a golden opportunity becomes a lost chance, not because you weren't capable, but because you didn't move when it mattered most. Opportunities have a rhythm. They often show up before you're fully ready, demanding that you stretch yourself, take a risk, or believe in your potential ahead of the proof. That's why so many people miss them. They expect readiness to come first. But in reality, the most successful people act before they feel ready. They understand that opportunity isn't about perfect timing. It's about recognizing the moment and having the courage to respond. This doesn't mean being reckless, but it does mean being brave. It means trusting your instincts and stepping into uncertainty, knowing that growth comes after action, not before. The cost of waiting isn't just the opportunity itself. It's also what that opportunity could have led to. One missed chance could have introduced you to new people, new skills, new directions in life. Opportunities often open doors to even more opportunities. It's a chain reaction, but when you hold back, you cut that chain before it even begins. And over time, this leads to regret, the kind of regret that doesn't come from failure, but from never trying at all. There's also a psychological toll. When you realize you've let something meaningful slip by, it can impact your confidence. You may begin to question your decision-making or your ability to recognize and seize the next chance. This doubt can make you even more hesitant in the future, creating a cycle of inaction. In contrast, when you say yes to an opportunity, even if it scares you, you build inner strength. You prove to yourself that you're capable of rising to the moment, of learning as you go, of making the most of what life offers. So the next time something exciting or challenging presents itself, pay attention to your instinct to wait. Ask yourself, am I truly being thoughtful, or am I letting fear or comfort keep me still? Opportunities don't come with guarantees, but neither does waiting. Sometimes the boldest thing you can do is say yes, not later, not someday, but now. Many people spend far too much time planning, preparing, and perfecting before they ever take a step forward. They believe that success requires having everything figured out ahead of time. A flawless strategy, ideal timing, the right resources, or complete confidence. But this mindset often leads to stagnation. What truly creates progress is not perfect planning, but consistent, imperfect action. Small steps taken today have far more power than waiting for a grand, ideal beginning. When you act even without full clarity, you gain experience, insight, and momentum. That's something no plan, no matter how detailed, can give you. Perfectionism is a subtle trap. It convinces you that your efforts aren't worth starting unless they're guaranteed to be great. This can be incredibly paralyzing. Instead of doing your best with what you have, you hold back, constantly comparing your starting point to someone else's finished product. You might spend weeks outlining goals, designing systems, or researching every possible option, all while never actually doing the thing that moves you forward. And ironically, in the quest for perfection, you often get further from your goal because progress is being sacrificed for preparation. On the other hand, small, consistent actions teach you more than any book or blueprint ever could. They give you real feedback. You start to understand what works, what doesn't, what needs to change, and what you're good at. This learning process builds confidence. Each time you act, you prove to yourself that you're capable of handling more than you thought. Action dissolves fear, clarifies confusion, and builds resilience. You don't need the perfect plan. You need to start, learn, and adjust along the way. This doesn't mean you shouldn't plan at all. Planning is important, but it should never become a form of procrastination. A rough plan with real execution beats a perfect plan sitting in a notebook. The goal is to move, not to wait until everything feels safe. Because truthfully, it may never feel completely safe. That's why action is so powerful. It creates clarity and courage. When you take small steps, even if they're clumsy, you show yourself that progress is possible, and once you start, it becomes easier to keep going. Ultimately, success is built on movement, not perfection. No one's path is linear or flawless. Those who achieve great things usually started messy. They launched before they were ready, made mistakes, learned quickly, and kept going. You can do the same. If you're waiting for everything to be perfect, you'll be waiting forever. But if you take one step today, just one, you're already ahead of where you were yesterday, and that's where real transformation begins. Success rarely belongs to the most cautious person in the room. It belongs to those who are willing to act boldly, take risks, and step outside their comfort zone. Waiting may feel safe, but it often leads to missed opportunities and unrealized potential. On the other hand, boldness opens doors. When you act decisively, even in the face of uncertainty, you send a powerful message to yourself and to the world. You are committed, ready to grow, and willing to face whatever comes next. That mindset doesn't just create success, it attracts it. People respond to bold energy. They notice when someone takes initiative, shows courage, and moves forward with conviction. Bold action doesn't mean being reckless or jumping in blindly. It means moving forward despite fear or incomplete information. It's choosing progress over perfection, clarity through experience, and confidence through action. The people who achieve their goals don't necessarily have more talent or resources. They simply choose to act while others hesitate. They trust that the details will work themselves out along the way. They know they can adapt, learn, and adjust as needed. And because of that, they get results while others are still deciding whether or not to begin. When you act boldly, you also build resilience. Every time you take a risk and keep going, even when it's uncomfortable or uncertain, you grow stronger. You become more capable, more creative, and more confident. You develop the kind of inner toughness that can't be gained from planning alone. It's forged in the doing. This growth makes the next bold step feel a little easier until boldness becomes your default mode of operation. That's when real breakthroughs happen. You stop waiting for opportunities and start creating them. It's important to understand that boldness is not about being fearless. It's about acting in spite of fear. Fear is natural. It shows up whenever you care about something deeply. But instead of letting it paralyze you, you can let it fuel your drive. Let it be the sign that you're on the edge of something meaningful. Every successful person has faced fear. The difference is that they didn't let it decide their future. They moved anyway, and in doing so, they gained what others only dreamed about. So if you're hesitating, if you're waiting for more certainty, remember this. The most powerful momentum is built when you stop overthinking and start doing. Boldness is a skill, and like any skill, it gets stronger the more you use it. Your dreams don't need a perfect plan. They need a brave first step. The life you want is on the other side of action. Success doesn't knock twice. Be bold enough to answer the first time.